So I just learned of a new chat command that shows us the total lifetime kills of our current character. So I'm going to be posting this just for fun on every video so you guys can see what I'm up to. I'd love to hear what your kills and deaths look like as well in the comments. And if you want to do it, you just type /kills and then /deaths. So I'm at 236,000 kills and 331 deaths. All right, let's get into this video. So it's day 4 of the league right now, and I've made a ton of upgrades on my Spark character since the day 2 update video. The most notable changes are the addition of the Forbidden Flame and Flesh jewels, as well as my large and medium cluster jewels and the purchase of a Watcher's Eye. Now, I figured I'd use this video to sort of explain how to pick out cluster jewels and how to pick out an appropriate Watcher's Eye, because these two items have a ton of variable mods and it's probably a little bit confusing deciding how to optimize those two items. So I'll be providing trade links, and we'll also just discuss the ups and downsides of different mods, because the best Watcher's Eye for me is not necessarily the best Watcher's Eye for you, even if we're playing very similar Spark characters. A lot of it is up to preference. Now, I do realize that I'm quite far ahead of the curve right now, so just because I'm making this video, don't feel like you should be at a point where you're contemplating cluster jewels and Watcher's Eyes, because I do understand that these are fairly late game upgrade pieces for a Spark character. So even if this isn't useful for you right now, I suppose you could reference it once you are at a point where these upgrades would make sense. And I hope this video also helps people who might be on the fence about whether or not they want to spec into clusters or spec into Watcher's Eye, because at least I'll be providing you some trade links to help get you started. And maybe you guys could even just set up a live search, and if somebody puts up a really good deal, it might make your decision a little bit easier. All right, so let's look at Watcher's Eyes. I have 2 searches. There's one for a 2-mod Watcher's Eye, which is what most of us are going to be using. Then there's a third that searches for a triple mod Watcher's Eye. There's currently none that exist. This is sort of a pipe dream. It's really hard to get 3 mods, so we'll just be focusing on the first link. All right, so up here are the 2 best offensive and the 2 best defensive mods, and down here I just have a few extra mods that aren't like my top tier, but they're still better than nothing. And if you're following my build, everything that's currently checked is like definitely good, and the stuff that aren't checked requires either discipline, precision, or clarity, and you may be running these if you have extra mana reservation, but otherwise you might not be able to fit them in. So let's go over these mods. The first 2 are the best damage mods. So the first one is like you do increased damage to enemies, which is a very good mod to have. The second one is cast speed. The damage is fairly comparable. It might depend on your specific gearing, but I would be happy with either one. And I guess obviously if you get both on the same Watcher's Eye, you have a really crazy damage Watcher's Eye. Now, the third one is Fizz damage reduction, and this is the same stat that you get from power charges. So if you're using the Forbidden Flesh and Flame Jewel that I'm using, you're going to have 4 power charge or 4 endurance charges, and this has the equivalent strength of 2 endurance charges. So maybe if you can't afford the Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh, you could use this Watcher's Eye and you would get like half value. And even if you are using the Forbidden Flame and Flesh jewels, you know, like getting more Fizz damage reduction is always great. So this is just a solid defensive mod in general. The last one is chance to block attack damage. and we like to have really high both attack block and spell block, so this is just another top tier mod. This unchecked one is if you're able to fit discipline in, this is very good because we hit so many monsters while mapping that, and this gives us just flat energy shield per hit. So it basically guarantees our energy shield is always going to instantly like top back up after we take a hit. But again, you have to have discipline, and I'm currently not running discipline. I don't know if I'll ever run discipline because Ashes of the Stars is just so expensive this league. I might not be able to get the reservation required. Now, this has a count of 1 up here because I don't even want to see a jewel if it doesn't have one of these good mods. And then I have a count of 2 down here. Now, 4 of these are the same as up here because if we can get 2 good mods, that's obviously the ideal scenario. However, there's also reduced extra damage from critical strikes, which is okay. I guess it makes damage more predictable or just like more streamlined. Again, it's not the best mod, but it is it's something. Now here is flat armor. Now flat armor has the synergy with Molten Shell because Molten Shell requires you to hit a certain threshold to get maximum damage mitigated from it, and we actually, I don't know if we can realistically hit that threshold, so any extra armor is going to be buffed by Determination and also buffed by Defiance Banner, so it's going to be actually a lot more armor than the flat value, and this is a flat value of 1000, so this is a ton of armor that, you know, just armor in general is good, but it really makes the Molten Shell pop better. And then, yeah, those are the 2 like sort of B tier mods. I guess we'll quickly talk about the unchecked ones. Chance to block spell damage is great. So if you have discipline, this is like top tier. I would include it up here even, possibly. But then, like, I don't know how many of us will be running discipline. Energy shield, we've covered that. Now these 2 discipline mods are pretty bad. I'd say these are the weakest mods out of everything here because we're hybrid, so like having faster energy shield recharge or just faster start of energy shield recharge, I don't think that's quite important. Crit strike multiplier. Now we don't use precision, but if you could get a jewel that has this, it's pretty good damage because we love critical strike multiplier. And then you could just throw on a level 1 precision. So feel free to check this. It will give you more options. And then if you're running Clarity, this reduces the cost of your spark by 10, which is really good. But again, you just have to make sure you're running Clarity. Like I dropped my Clarity, although I was running Clarity up until that point. And actually, if I had gotten this on a Watcher's Eye, I would be happy to just run a level 1 Clarity, because this is quite powerful. All right, so I guess we can search it with these 2 on and see what we get. Get 11 results. The first one is chance to block attack damage and cast speed, so that's like 2 A tier modifiers. The next one is defensive and then clarity. There's defensive, and there's the crit strike multiplier. So 2x, quickly up to 4x. And then defensive with crit strike multiplier. Now this is 2 defensive mods, and I would be wary about getting a double defensive mod. Like, again, it's just preference, and maybe your character you feel is way too squishy, but this league, in my opinion, you require a higher damage output than usual. So I would strongly recommend just having at least 1 damage mod, preferably one of these 2, or at least get the crit multi. But yeah, this filter is gonna show stuff like double defensive mods. As you can see, it gets up to 6x pretty fast. I don't know. That's my thoughts on Watcher's Eyes. All right, so next we'll cover large cluster jewels, which is a lot more nuanced and a lot more subject to personal preference. So there's no right or wrong jewel for everybody. It's just entirely up to what you want. Now, Doriani's lesson gives us generic spell lifesteal, which is good because a lot of us are going to be doing partial lightning, partial cold, and that's just like every single bit of spell damage can be used for lifesteal. And then these two, you can only choose one of them. You can't get both of them on the same large cluster. Now, Snowstorm is a lot of damage. Snowstorm is 8% of lightning damage is extra cold damage against chilled enemies, and with Call of the Brotherhood, everything is chilled all the time. This is just insane damage. However, Inspired Oppression is a ton of mana regen, and we have mana issues, so you might prefer this over pure damage. So we get 30% mana regeneration if you've frozen recently, and 30% if you've shocked recently. And we're guaranteed to like shock everything all the time, and we are probably freezing enemies as well quite reliably. So that's 60 mana regen. And then there's also there's still damage on it, but like the main purpose is it's like hybrid damage and mana regen. So you're gonna have to pick one or the other, and that's up to you. And then down here, this is just to make sure we have 3 skills that all do something useful. So I guess I'll do a quick search with Inspired Oppression because that's what I'm using because I'm having mana issues, but if you don't, I would go for Snowstorm instead. So right now there's only 5 that exist. Now the third mod here is Prismatic Heart. This is 10 to all elemental res and also quite a bit of damage. I mean, this is just all around solid no matter what your build is. You'll always be happy with this. Again, this is the same, this is the same, this is the same, this is the same. So that's just basically only catching that out of the other 2. Now if we search for a Snowstorm, this one, it's going to be a lot more varied. Now the third one is Overshock, lightning damage, and then increased effect of shock. That's good. You want to, as you hover over a boss as you're hitting it, you'll see your shock value. And you want to be capping that out. Like you want to be hitting 50% shock. So if you're not, and you don't need resistances, this is definitely better than the one with resistances. But again, resistances are nice, so it depends. This one has Storm Rider. Just increased cold damage, increased lightning damage. Again, enemies are going to be shocked and chilled, so that's a lot of damage. This is top tier. This is a very good damage node, or damage cluster. It's only 2x. Again, that's the same. So this one, Thunderstruck, maybe I should uncheck this. This knocks back, but the reason it's not so good is because Spark will like bounce. Sometimes it'll hit the back of the enemy because it'll have gone through them and it'll come back and it'll actually knock them like forward into you. So Thunderstruck, yeah, just keep in mind it's a little bit sketchy, but it does give you crit chance and increased damage. So, there is a lot of good stuff on there. I'd say like this is maybe preference based. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I'm not going to say it's bad. This Prismatic Heart, covered that already. Is there anything new? So you can see there's a lot for around 3 Exalted Orbs. So expect to pay around 3 for a large cluster. And yeah, just keep in mind, you're going to need to check one or the other, not both, because you can't get all three of these on the same cluster. So lastly, we'll be covering medium cluster jewels. These are really strong for Spark, and they're also the cheapest out of the 3 jewels we're discussing. So I would look out for these as an entry point into extending our passive tree. So for 10 chaos, we can get aerodynamics with eye to eye. Now this is a really good mixture of having an additional pierce while also having a ton of damage. Now you can get up to 3 pierce on your gloves, because you can get 2 pierce from the implicit. You can also craft 1 pierce. It's a June craft. I would say you don't necessarily need to go more than 3 pierce, although it's not bad to do so. I wouldn't go crazy on the pierce. So again, it's up to you. If you have 2 pierce in your gloves, I would get at least 1 aerodynamics. Eye to eye, the downside is more than half the damage you need to be nearby the enemies, so this is sort of subject to your playstyle. Now I like to be somewhat nearby bosses just so I can see their mechanics, but again, like, you're not always going to get this value. So if you take off eye to eye, the price goes up to 20C, and now we're getting repeater, which I think is a little bit better than eye for eye. You're getting 30 damage instead of, I believe it is 60, so you're getting half the increased damage. However, you're getting 8% cast speed, so it is still a lot of damage here, and this damage is guaranteed. Now, the most expensive of the medium clusters is around 80 chaos, and this is streamlined with aerodynamics, and streamlined just gives us a lot of projectile speed, but this is less damage overall per hit. You got to keep in mind that projectile speed lets our projectiles have more of a chance to hit multiple times, so it will increase the likelihood that we'll hit our theoretical maximum damage. But again, like, that works best when you're in boss arenas where the projectiles are not just going off down the map and never coming back, but when they're like hitting walls and bouncing back. So in the case where there's lots of walls, like closed maps or small boss arenas, the proj speed is going to be winning out. However, if you're doing open maps, like say you're doing dunes, the projectile speed is going to be not really realized in terms of extra damage. So that would be the explanation of streamlined. Now, if you already have a bunch of pierce and you think you might not want to have this 1 extra pierce, you could go with eye for an eye and repeater, and this is the most damage, and this is like 1 chaos, or wait, sorry, 2. This is, yeah, like 2 chaos. This is just a ton of damage. And if you don't want the eye for an eye or eye to eye variability, you can get these 2. That's 5 chaos. Again, like, all of this stuff is super cheap. You could also look into the crit medium clusters, although I find capping crit isn't too hard. So like, it's not going to result in as much damage, but those would be an option, and those are also somewhat cheap, but I'm not going to include a link to that. We'll just I'll just put this link in the description. All right, well, that's going to wrap up this video. Thanks for watching. Maybe I'll put a character update on my build tomorrow. We'll see how that goes. All right, peace.